So you want to get your Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu blue belt faster. This video is going to be the top 3 ways that you can accomplish that. Plus, at the end of the video, I'll share the story of what it felt like when I got my blue belt and what changes from white to blue. The first tip I'm going to say is sort of a flip of the mindset. You have to let go of wanting your blue belt. You have to let go of trying to go after it, because the way you actually get it, of course, everybody knows you show up and train. So I'm going to go over some things that you can do to accelerate this process. But if you show up to your gym with the intent of, when am I going to get my blue belt? You start comparing yourself to the other white belts in the gym, maybe the other blue belts. Maybe you're good enough to tap some blue belts out and you're wondering why you're not getting your belt. Well, the reason is most of the time there are a ton of white belts at the gym, and there's a huge filter between white and blue, and honestly all the belts, that causes people to drop off. So upper belts are not going to pay as much attention to you if you don't show consistency. Your coach is probably not going to spend a little bit of extra time investing in you simply because you're a white belt. And the fact of the matter is, there are a lot of white belts out there, and there are a lot of people who show up who are really gung-ho, who want to get after it. They train really hard for like a few months, and then they start to peter out. So let go of the expectation or the really strong desire to get your blue belt, and instead shift focus on enjoying class and getting at least one good thing out of every single class. And if you do that, you add one more skill to your tool belt, you sharpen up your technique a little bit more. Obviously, if you get better at jiu-jitsu, you're going to get your blue belt eventually. So letting go of that expectation is going to allow you to actually enjoy the process way more. When I first started jiu-jitsu, I never thought about getting any of the belts whatsoever. I trained at a gym that actually charged for belt testing, and I was so fortunate to also be training with a judo teacher who, knew some other grappling stuff, so we didn't do just judo. But he was very big on the philosophy of not caring so much about the belt and instead focusing on the process of what makes you better. And as a result, I stopped paying for those belt tests because I knew I wasn't going to stay at that gym forever. So maybe if I wanted to pay them money, I could have gotten like 4 stripes or a blue belt. I think I ended up getting 2 or 3 stripes from them, and I ended up moving away, which is one of the best things that could have happened to me because I ran into my current coach, who was really, really beneficial for my growth and development. But I let go of that expectation of even caring about the belt whatsoever. And then martial arts became about having fun with my friends. It became about learning these new techniques, about getting in shape. And I started to see all these other benefits that weren't about getting the belt, and it just made the training process so much better. Tip number 2 to fast track your success to blue belt is going to be try to make friends with an upper belt who, even a blue, it doesn't really matter, even a higher level white belt. Someone who's a little bit more experienced with you in the gym, so that way you can have a more consistent training partner who is going to help you out with some techniques. What I try to do whenever I get partnered up with a lower belt is I want to make sure that they're learning the technique the best way they can. I'm going to give them appropriate reactions. Now, you may feel tempted to be partnered up with another white belt because you can sit there and both do the technique at like 30% correctness and no one's going to look at you like a doofus. But if you get paired up with an upper belt and you start doing the technique, then you're like, nah, man, that ain't correct. You should do it like this, that, or the other. And that might be a little bit weird or embarrassing at first, but obviously in the long run, that's going to be way more beneficial. If you ingrain bad habits into your muscle memory, you're going to really, really fight to build over those bad habits rather than just starting with good habits. It's like building your house on a foundation of sand versus solid concrete. Eat those little bits of embarrassment where you're being corrected by an upper belt, and you'll thank yourself in the long run because you won't be building up bad habits. So if you're able to make friends with someone who's more experienced than you, they're more than likely going to go out of their way to give you a little bit of advice here or there to help you out learning this technique, to just go the extra mile for you. So that's super beneficial. On top of having someone to take you under their wing and go a little bit out of their way to show you some extra techniques, it's going to play into that first part of making training more enjoyable and not comparing yourself so much. Because when you have friends at the gym, when it becomes a more social atmosphere, you're not going to be so tied up in what you need to do to get this next belt, to get the next stripe. It's not about that. It is, but it isn't. If you stick it to the end of the video, I'll share what changes when you get your blue belt. But I'm going to be honest. Belts help a ton in some ways, but they don't help defend yourself. They don't help you on the mat. You know, there's a common saying that the belt only covers 2 inches of your lapel. You got to cover the rest of your ass. And what that means is, yeah, the belt is cool and nice and all, but I would much rather be a white belt who's able to tap out black belts than a black belt who gets tapped out by blue belts. It's just, I'd rather have the skill than the belt. The belt is just a representation of the skill, and that's why it means so much to people. Because you put in all that work and you build the skill, so now you have this thing to represent that hard work. But without the hard work, the belt is meaningless. Because if you really wanted a blue belt, you could just go online and buy one right now. It's not the same. Gracie University, I'm looking at you. Tip number 3 for getting your blue belt faster is going to be to go slightly above and beyond to show a little bit of extra commitment or consistency to your coach. Because there are so many white belts in the gym, if you're able to do something that sets yourself apart just a little bit, maybe you stay after to help mop up the mats. Maybe you show up a little bit early and warm up. Maybe you ask appropriate questions, not weird random questions about what would happen in the streets or what would happen if this guy punched you. Maybe a question that helps you understand something. Don't go overboard, but if you show that you're a little bit more committed than the average white belt, that's honestly all coaches are looking for. They really just care about someone who's going to show up on time with a good attitude and train. If you can make it a consistent part of your schedule to train, honestly, 3 days a week is probably minimum, but I would shoot for 4 days a week, so that way sometimes, if you're super lucky, you get to train 5. Maybe you train 3, which is the minimum, but your average should be 4. And if you have those 4 rock-solid, consistent days, I promise you're going to look around and start to wonder why you're not running into the same people on those same consistent days. And for me, I thought that was just because I was missing the people and they weren't showing up on the days that I was showing up. Truthfully, that's because most people don't show up that consistently because it's hard. They have a life. So give up your life and train consistently. No, you don't have to give up your life, but do train consistently. Do go out of your way to make yourself not noticeable. You don't have to go out of your way and be like, coach, I'm ready to be the next MMA fighter. I'm going to, be the world champion. Just, don't do that. Just be consistent, be a good student, ask some questions, train as smart as you can, try to get partnered up with more experienced people, eat the corrections. If they're telling you to do something because you're doing it wrong, really go out of your way to try to implement that. If your coach is saying, hey man, maybe you should work on this, don't just be like, oh yeah, okay, and then forget about it and then go do some whatever move that looks cool. Actually spend like a month or 2 working on that thing that the coach told you to work on, and then go up to them and say, hey, so I've been working on this thing. Maybe you notice that when you're trying to do your triangle, there's this, you can't break their posture down, and they give you a hint to do that. And you've played with that for a couple months, and then you go up to your coach and say, hey, so I've been working on this thing that you told me to do, and do you have any other things that I should work on, or do you have any further advice? If someone who was my student came up and did that to me, I'd be like, oh, so he actually listened to what I said. He actually tried to implement that, and he's coming up and asking for more. This shows that he wants it, so why not give him another promotion? So that's what your coach is going to be looking for. It doesn't have to be anything crazy, but they want you to show up, they want you to have fun, and they want you to be consistent. Since you made it to the end of the video, I'm going to tell you the story of how I got my blue belt and a quick brief thing of what changes when you start going up in rank. So, I got my blue belt, as I alluded to earlier in the video, not at the first gym I trained at. I was there for about maybe a year or so, while I was also training with my judo instructor and other grappling martial arts within that. It was I just call it all grappling. It's sort of the same deal. And after that year was expired, I went off to college and I started practicing at the judo club. There were definitely no belts at the judo club because it was just a bunch of college students who had done jiu-jitsu, who had done judo, and we all just kind of got together and we practiced our moves on each other. Occasionally there would be a black belt who would come in and help show us some moves, but more often than not, we would just be having our own little practice session. We would practice our break falls, we would practice our throws, we'd do some technique, and we'd spar. And truthfully, that does make you way better. So then I met up with my current coach, and I was like, okay, I'm just a white belt under him because I feel like I hadn't really earned any rank at that point. So I started over from a white belt, and let me tell you, that was the most fun I've ever had in my entire jiu-jitsu career as a belted individual, because when you actually let go of the pressure, I was like, okay, so yeah, I am a white belt, so that means I don't have to know anything. But since I had all this experience, it wasn't like I was completely hopeless. So I would show up very consistently. I would say I did like 3 or 4 days a week jiu-jitsu, and then 3, maybe 2 days a week of the judo. So I was training quite a bit, but I was super consistent. I made some friends. I basically followed all the tips I made in this video. And I don't remember how long it was. I wasn't keeping a jiu-jitsu journal at that point. But within a certain amount of time, I got striped up here or there. I was doing pretty well in the gym. And my coach, like, instead of charging me $80 to, test for a stripe or whatever, he surprises me. He pulls out a belt and he's like, hey, it's time for your blue belt. And I was like, oh, that's so cool. So I got a little picture and I was super happy about that. But I did notice that once I got my blue belt, I knew the same tech. It's not like from day one, like the day before I got my blue belt, I was one person. The day after, I got another. But people did treat me way different. If I had a insight on a technique that someone was doing wrong, maybe it was something I practiced before, something super simple like the cross collar choke, and their grips were super shallow. And I was like, hey man, maybe you should get your grips a little bit deeper. As a white belt, they sort of like brush you off. And the day after, when I was a blue belt, they're like, they actually considered that and they put it into play. That's the biggest thing that happens when you get your belt, is people show you a little bit more respect. If this video gets 20 likes, I'll make a whole video about what happens when you get Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu belts and why they are actually important. But a sneak preview is, essentially, people treat you with more respect. Even though you're the same grappler, you could be a world beater, but if you show up with a white belt on, no one's going to take you seriously until you're able to demonstrate with your technique that you know what you're doing. But if someone's able to glance at you and see you got a blue or a purple or brown or a black belt, they're like, okay, at least this person knows a little bit of what they're talking about. So it's sort of a quick heuristic to let people know how good you are. So that's my quick little story about how I got my blue belt and 3 tips for how you can get your blue belt faster. If you liked the video, of course, supporting the channel on the YouTube stuff down below, commenting, liking, subscribing, sharing the videos. It goes a long way in helping me grow this channel. So I appreciate you sticking it to the end. Have a good one. Oh, drink your kombucha. Don't have tummy problems. That's the thing I've been forgetting to remind you guys in the video. It's my favorite drink ever. Don't forget about the booch. Peace.